What's going on? You're in the Beat Sessions. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary, and welcome into the monthly top 10. The month of June finds us halfway through the year, and so it feels only natural that we take a look back and examine the top 10 albums of 2022 so far. And it's been a killer year for music. This list was not easy to put together, but I think that's why I had so much fun doing it, and I'm really excited to share it with you. Also want to point out, too, for those of you who are new to the channel or not familiar with it at all, when we talk about an album, we're not just talking about the music, we are talking about the whole vinyl package. So there's a couple records. I'll just call out Florence and the Machine and Angel Olsen. Really loved both of those albums, but the vinyl packages just, they left something to be desired there. So unfortunately, you're not going to find them on this list, but these 10 records are incredible. They have awesome vinyl packages to go along with them as well, starting with number 10, an Ibibio Sound Machine and their new record Electricity. And for their fourth studio album, this London band reached out to Hot Chip for the production end of things, and the results are so satisfying. You can just literally feel the energy of those sessions pouring off of this record, which I think finds this band at the top of their game, combining 80s Afrobeat, disco, and funk with 90s house and drum and bass. Their sound is so incredible and so unique. It really is satisfying. It reminds me of a combination of Fela Kuti and Daft Punk. And singer Eno Williams, she is so powerful. Her voice, so commanding. Absolutely love this band. They need to be talked about more. Key tracks on this thing include All That You Want and Truth No Lie. Coming in at number 9 is The Weeknd with Dawn FM. Rolling off the success of After Hours, The Weeknd delivers another solid performance here with Dawn FM. This album conceptualizing what it'd be like to listen to a radio station in purgatory. And I love that he brought aboard Jim Carrey to be the MC for that radio station. Really is a perfect fit for this project. But what I like about this record is that it finds The Weeknd in a more optimistic and positive state. In the past, I feel like his music has always been dark, and it's definitely been sinister at times even. But this new record, Dawn FM, it's really in the title. It's about going towards the light. Finding that positivity. It feels like this record is The Weeknd, beginning that process of finding peace. And so it's pretty cool to see him at a different point in his career and making music that's reflecting that. Plus, I love the energy of this record. It really feels like Michael Jackson meets New Order. Absolute outstanding combination of 80s music. Key tracks on this thing include Take My Breath and Out of Time. Coming in at number 8 on your list is Mitski with Laurel. I love this album, and I especially love the way that Mitski stirred the pot with this thing. There's a handful of critics out there that are arguing, why did she even come back? It doesn't feel like her heart is in it. She's just complaining about fans and fame, etc., etc. And I'd argue that those critics, they just don't get it. Mitski's music has always been about navigating personal experience, and on this record, it sounds like an artist who is learning to navigate fame from a different perspective. It sounds like she's realized that there's always going to be that negativity attached to her vocation, and frankly, to any vocation. There's always going to be people out there that are trying to drag you down. But on this record, it feels like she's having this realization of, if I'm going to make art, I'm going to create it for myself. And if you're on board, great. And if not, you can go straight to Laurel. I also love this album too because of the 80s new wave influence. There's a lot on this thing that really feels like Belinda Carlisle, and I love it for that reason. Key tracks on this thing include Working for the Knife and The Only Heartbreaker. Coming in at number 7 is Beach House with Once Twice Melody. There are very few bands out there like Beach House, and I think Once Twice Melody is a marvelous example of the two main factors that come together to separate this band from their peers. The first being their unique style of psychedelic dream pop. Their music is so rich in ambience. You know when you're listening to a Beach House song. But the second factor, and I think the most important factor, is that this is their 8th record, and they are still making music that sounds so fresh, even though it kind of sounds the same. I love the comparison on Apple Music. The writer chose to compare Beach House to AC/DC, but I can understand it. I see it. AC/DC is a band that has put out music in 5 different decades, and if you showed someone their music that wasn't familiar with it, I don't think that they would be able to tell you which AC/DC song came from which decade. There's a lot of that at play here with Beach House, and I think that's one of the things that makes them so marvelous. They have this unique sound, and they keep finding ways to incorporate all these other different influences and reinvent that song. It's remarkable to listen to. Key tracks on this record include Superstar and New Romance. Coming in at number 6 is Destroyer with Labyrinthitis. Dan Behar is one of those songwriters that, with Destroyer, it feels like he's always able to push the envelope in all the right ways. In Labyrinthitis, this record, it feels like 10 lines cast in different directions. And no matter how far Dan cast out each line, he's always able to reel each one back in. This thing has such amazing continuity and production. Really such a pleasure to listen to. I would argue that this is one of the better Destroyer albums, but he's dabbling with glam rock, dream pop, there's funk, electronic pop on this thing. He is all over the place in all the right ways. Plus, I just love his voice. He has such a signature sound to his voice, and his vocal and lyric performances stand out on this record. Key tracks include June and It Takes a Thief. Coming in at number 5 is Phife Dawg with Forever. And Phife was only about 2/3 of the way through this project at the time of his tragic death back in 2016. But thankfully, longtime collaborator Dion Liverpool was able to step in and complete this record in a way that I think Phife really would have been pleased with. This record sounds so fresh while capturing that classic sound that we all came to know and love Phife for. You get solid beats that are just so easy to groove to, but they take a back seat to the vocal performances, which are always the highlight. And this new record is a little bittersweet to listen to. It's definitely more sweet than it is bitter. But what's so tough is this album doesn't play out like a final record. This album plays out like a guy who has reached middle age, and he's reflecting fondly on his successes, and he's looking back on his mistakes, and he's trying to take lessons from those mistakes and move forward and be a better man. And I think that that's what people really miss about Phife Dawg. None of us are perfect, but Phife was always the type of guy who always tried to set an example and lead by example. And he's a guy who always tried to do the right thing and be a positive influence. And I know that he's very missed for that reason. Key tracks on this album include Nutshell Part 2 and Godsend. Coming in at number 4 is Soccer Mommy with Sometimes Forever. And I'd argue that her third record here is her strongest to date, as Soccer Mommy continues to flesh her sound out just ever so slightly. This record is another fun example of how far you can go when you surround yourself with the right people. She brings aboard Daniel Lopatin to produce on this thing. He's an experimental electronic producer and DJ. He deserves so much recognition for the work that he did on this record. His influence, his impact is so minimal. He's just creating these very light ambient textures in the background that really work to enhance the 90s alternative melodies that she is creating. The sound of this record, it's so familiar and so original, and I love everything about it. Key songs on this thing include Shotgun and Don't Ask Me. Coming in at number 3 on your list is Spoon with Lucifer on the Sofa. For their 10th studio album, Britt Daniel and co. opted to get back to basics, to just make a good old-fashioned rock and roll record. And in the process of doing so, they made one of the best records of the year and possibly the best record of their career. I think that the alternative music landscape has become so dominated by this idea of experimentation, of constantly pushing the boundaries, that just simply writing music with good hooks and good licks and good melodies just got lost. And so that's what makes Spoon so consistently good and so refreshing, is the ability to identify that. I think that they could have made this record at any point in their career, but seeing the music landscape for what it is, navigating that, and just knowing what is lacking out there, what the listener really needs. And what we really needed was just some good old-fashioned rock and roll, and I'm really glad that Britt Daniel and co. were able to deliver with this record. Key tracks include Wild and My Babe. Coming in at number 2 is Black Country New Road with Ants From Up Here. I think that a lot of people, at any given moment while listening to this record, have this realization that this thing is going to end up in a very high spot on a lot of lists this year, and rightfully so. This album is absolutely gorgeous. Finds the band building on the post-punk and post-rock style of their first record, while adding an element of chamber pop to their sound. And I mean, really gives their music such a rich dimension, and honestly reminds me of an outfit like Arcade Fire. Older Arcade Fire, though. I love the album We, but I would also argue that to a certain degree, the fire is kind of fizzled out in that outfit, so to speak. I love the energy and the vigor of Black Country New Road. There's this intangible quality that this outfit has right now, and they're in a very special spot making some really excellent music. They're also in a very interesting crossroads. Lead singer Isaac Wood left the band 4 days before the release of this record, citing mental health issues. That comes first and foremost. I hope that he's able to get the help that he needs, and I hope that he's able to just find himself in a better spot in his life. I think that it's really cool that the band left the door open for him to return. He's an amazing musician. I would love to see that return happen if he feels like he's in the right place to do so. But I think that what happened with Isaac is something that happens with a lot of creative people. And, you know, when your art starts to pay the bills and there's this whole level of professionalism added to that dimension, it complicates things. It can be really difficult. There's definitely been moments where I wake up and, you know, whether it's DJing or whether it's creating content for the channel, you just struggle. You know, there's just some days where you just don't want to do it. There's some days where I would just rather go on a hike with my dogs. And so, Isaac, I wish you the best. I hope that you get the help that you need and that you just are able to find some happiness, whether it's with this band or without them. You know, I really hope that you are able to return. The band says that they do not plan on playing any of the songs on these 2 records without him. I think that's a really cool move. I think that, you know, just a really cool show of respect for what is going on with that situation right now. So I wish all the best for all the players in this band and for Isaac as well. And no matter what happens in the future, Black Country New Road, this moment, this record, really a special place in time. And I think that we should all be very thankful for having this album. Key tracks on this thing include Good Will Hunting and The Place Where He Inserted the Blade. And that brings us to our #1 album of the year so far, and that belongs to Gang of Youth with Angel in Real Time. And I got to admit that I'm kind of shocked. As I've put together this list, I've obviously been enjoying the list that other individuals have compiled, and none of them have mentioned this record. Not on top 10 list or top 20. I even saw a top 50 list that didn't mention this album, and I think that is such a failure. I think that this is easily the most powerful experience on album this year. This record is absolutely breathtaking. The music itself is beautiful. But David Leo Pepe, frontman, you read about what happened with this record and what drove him creatively and his humility and his gratitude in the face of a situation where he could have easily felt so indignant and so wronged. But I just really admired the way that he chose to approach this situation. His father passed away, and you know that's difficult in and of itself, but he discovered that his father basically led a double life after his passing. And so this album is really about how he embraced that process, the full amalgamation of emotions. And I'm sure that anger was there at some point a little bit, but you know, he talks about how, you know, he had a brother that he never knew about. He reached out to him. There's all this stuff that came of this situation. And I really think it's so cool to look at that. You could have, like I said, you could have easily, you know, seen a guy just be angry and just be so mad at the world and at his dad and at everybody else. But he chose not to do that. He chose just to love. And that's the feeling that you get on this record. There's so much love pouring off of this record. I mean, like every time I listen to this thing, I almost feel like I'm just going to burst out from the inside. Just an incredibly powerful experience, and my favorite record of the year so far, hands down, no questions about it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I really hope that you've enjoyed this list. I hope if you haven't listened to any of these records and you decide to check them out, that you enjoy them. Please like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel, do all the things to help me blow this project up in 2022. Stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews. We will see you next time on the Beat Sessions.